Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another edition of your favorite NFL podcast that has been sweeping the nation in some way, shape, or form for the last 120 plus weeks. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. As you see, only two of us on the screen this week. A dynamic, destructive duo, not our usual triumvirate, because Justin is busy this week. He is witnessing a ceremony of holy matrimony. Okay, someone close to him is getting married. So congrats to the happy couple there. And congrats to Justin for getting a weekend off. Good for him. But no, he is away. But the two of us, we are here to steer the ship per usual. Myself, Iceman Jurg, and of course, joining me on this one. I believe when it's just been two of us, I think this is the most common duo that shows up. The Podfather himself. Podfather, how we doing on this Saturday?
If you hear a child in the background, she is refusing to sleep at the moment. So I'm trying my best to make sure that she does go to sleep. But I have the monitor here just in case she gets really out of hand. But no, I'm good otherwise. It was a very weird week for football wise this past week. So I'm happy to talk about it and push forward. Being in last place as per usual. So. No.
Yes. So obviously, with Justin not being here, ladies and gentlemen, you will not get a live edition of the hashtag SAOC pick challenge, unfortunately. But we will read you the picks we made because we decided to make our picks beforehand to just make it simple for everyone. So we will read those here in a couple moments. Here to start the show, really, because of course the meat and potatoes, as a good friend of mine always says, is going to be our discussion of Week 3 and the fact that I feel like we say this from time to time, and we want this, of course, because the word chaos is in there. But this was actually a pretty chaos-riddled, upset-filled Week 3 of the NFL season, which it impacted, I could say it for me especially, and I'd imagine for the both of you as well, it impacted some of our thought processes for our Week 4 pick challenge. Because I don't think this was not a simple week. This is not a simple week of picks for us, I would like to think. So we'll let the people know of all of our picks here in a few months. But before we get to that, you guys know, of course, fun football chaos. We start with some fun, and we start with a mind-blowing fact of the week.
I'm going to take you through an interesting little story that will end up with a indie rock band getting its name. So back in the early days of the New York Mets, back in the 1962 season, actually, relevant because they just had their ignoble record of most losses in a season broken by the Chicago White Sox of this year. So they popped champagne last night, I assume. Richie Ashburn, who had come to the team from Philadelphia, who led the team in batting, singles, walks, and all of that, he was a center fielder. And anytime there was a fly ball hit to short center field, he would come on and try and make the catch. The shortstop of the Mets, who was Elio Chacon, would try and go out to make the catch. And because there was a language barrier, they couldn't understand each other, so they would collide or they would, drop the ball, whatever. So there was a meeting that the team had where basically, Chacon didn't understand any English. Ashburn knew no Spanish, so they tried to figure out what did all these things mean. And so Chacon and Ashburn talked to each other, and they had a plan for how to deal with, the language barrier and the fly ball. So the only phrase that they knew how to say was the Spanish phrase for "I got it." The Spanish phrase for "I got it" we'll get to in just a second. So basically, when they figured out that phrase, if a fly ball was hitting the center and Chacon would try and run out for it, Ashburn would yell the phrase, and Chacon would back off. So they tried this a couple times in practice, and then they actually had it played in the field, and it was all good until left fielder Frank Thomas decided to come in and charge and bowl over Ashburn for a fly ball. Ashburn looked at him and said, what did you do that for? I had it. Thomas said, I didn't understand you. What the hell does yellow tango mean? The phrase is actually yo la tengo, which in Spanish means I got it. 24 years after that little anecdote, Ira Kaplan and Georgia Hubley of Hoboken, New Jersey, would form an indie rock shoegaze type band, and they would call themselves Yo La Tengo. Still in existence today as an experimental rock, mostly cover artist type of band. They usually play some original music, but they're what's known as the quintessential critics band, if you will. And so I figured, that was kind of a nice little lead in to all of that, because again, with all the history with the Mets and the White Sox and all of that, nice little Yola Tango Spanish for all of you out there in the etherwebs today. So there you are.
Impressive per usual. What a mind-blowing fact, to say the very least. That was a good one. I'm not surprised. The Podfather always dives, as we say, he goes into the rabbit hole, so none of you have to go down those particular rabbit holes.
This is true.
So
stay away from them, kids.
Stay away. You will be sucked in for hours, and you will waste your Saturday.
Oh,
which is probably what both of us are going to end up doing after the show. I mean, come on. Rick has more mind-blowing facts of the week that he has to research your kids.
Come on. So, absolutely.
So there's that. So a outstanding mind-blowing fact. Now let's question if some things are fact or fiction, Rick, with a quick edition of fact or fiction. Of course, the games master is not here, so we're not going to have the usual pomp and circumstance. I feel like Name That Player should be preserved for whenever Justin is here, because he always comes up with good ones. But I could always, come in every once in a while to give some, little fun ones. So we bring back, for the first time in a while, I feel, fact or fiction. So Rick, here is going to be this is the fact portion of it, and this is where we'll then lead to your opinion of fact or fiction. There are 5 undefeated teams in the NFL right now. This is fact for the people, not fiction. The Bills are 3-0. The Steelers are 3-0. The Chiefs are 3-0. The Vikings are 3-0. And the Seattle Seahawks are 3-0. So all those teams, 3 in the AFC, 2 in the NFC, are 3-0. So the fact or fiction question to you, Rick, do you think more than 2 of these 5 teams will end up winning their division come the end of the season because of this good 3-0 start?
So you're asking me about it's more than half, right? You're asking me if 3 minimum will win their divisions.
Yes.
That's tough because they are playing in really tough divisions too. But they all have some. Well, not all of them. The majority of them, I think, have some staying power. So let's take this one by one. I'll start with the obvious one. Kansas City, I think yes. I mean, that division, the Chargers are kind of in a good spot right now, but they play this, I think, next week. Kansas City and the Chargers play. So I feel like that's going to be the real testament to how the Chargers really are. If you can swing with the big boys, then you're probably okay. But I think Kansas City is just too good and too lucky in certain circumstances, referees. All right. The Bills, a bit of a surprise, but I think the only team they have to really worry about right now is the Jets, because the Dolphins won't have Tua for a while, and you saw how bad their offense was last week. And so the Patriots are just, the Patriots. So I could see them possibly doing it. So that's 2, 1.5 to 2. The Steelers are such an interesting case because they're a very tough defensive team. Their offense isn't playing up to standard, but their defense is phenomenal. And they're helped by the fact that division, it's surprising because, I think the division, I think them and the Seahawks are the only teams that are unbeaten leading their division where there's no team that's 2-1 behind them. So they've got at least a 2-game lead at the moment, So will that stick? I could see it. I mean, friend of the show, Mike Tomlin, is always a good candidate to have a good solid season. That's 3. Because the Vikings, I don't think so, because I think the Lions are going to come into form a little bit later on, or the Packers will a little bit later on. And then the Seahawks, while they're doing well, and the Niners are hurt a little bit, I think the Seahawks are just, the next team to kind of have an injury come their way. So I would probably say fact based upon that logic of 3 of the teams I think could. They're all in the AFC, because I think the NFC is just too good of a conference to just really, have somebody declared right now as a division winner. And I think that if it comes down to any of the teams, I think it's all the AFC teams. I think Pittsburgh might be the most surprising one of the 3. But again, the way they're playing football right now is really sound, and Cleveland's a mess. Baltimore is not the Baltimore that we expected them to be. And Cincinnati, woof marron, as you always say. Not great. So, I say fact for this one.
All right. A fact from the Podfather. there, and he is predicting that it'll be the 3 AFC teams that will be able to hold serve. I'll be the usual contrarian and say fiction. No, I mean, I agree with you on the NFC side. I think when it comes to both the Seahawks and the Vikings, I think these are good starts for these two teams in terms of having a strong case for once we get to like the week 10, 11 point of the season of wild card conversations.
Yeah.
And you get these wins early, it'll only help you out further down the line, considering you look at some teams that are going to be, well, they wanted to be hopeful for wild cards for a division chance maybe, but now may need to look at the wild card. It is a 1-2 Falcons team that maybe they'll go 1-3 by the end of this week. The Cowboys are currently 2-2. Not great for them. They're obviously going to hope for a bit of a drop off. So going 3-0, if you're Minnesota and Seattle, like obviously you're looking over your shoulder, and you're seeing, if you're Minnesota, 2-1 teams in your division. If you're Seattle, like yes, they're injured, but San Fran as very much a chance as anyone that they can make a run, and they've done that in years past as we've done the show. So we can't count that out, to say the very least. It'll be intriguing. So I don't think either of the NFC teams could do it. And the AFC, realistically, like smart money in any way, shape, or form is always on the Chiefs. They've got such a good start. If they do the job against LA this weekend, start 4-0, it gives them a very strong chance when it comes to that division, because the Raiders are looking for answers, and apparently people doing business for themselves, apparently. And Denver, I mean, you have a rookie quarterback, the growing pains of a rookie QB. Bo Nix would have to go up several leaps and several bounds in order to make any serious effort there. And then Justin Herbert being a little bit, nicked up ankle is not great for Los Angeles, to say the very least. And then when it comes to the Steelers and the Bills, it's like Buffalo probably has the best of the shots, which is ironic considering how all three of us were so down on them going into the season. But obviously this is what injuries do to a team. And I don't mean when it comes to the Bills, I mean when it comes to their opponents, because the Dolphins' season is derailed at this point because the minimum is 4 weeks when a player is put on. But as we've heard recently, like the doubtfulness of Christian McCaffrey returning pre-Halloween at this point, it's probably not going to happen. And then Tua, when is the earliest we can expect him to come back? November? Maybe mid-November? And as we've always pointed out on this show, you start to worry about Tua once you get closer to the winter months. So it's going to be very interesting. Like the Bills next to the Chiefs probably have the best chance, just because like the team that was supposed to be the top team in that division, at least to many, the popular pick, it's just not going for them right now. And I mean, the Jets, I want to give them their due credence, 2-1. It would take a massive run of form for the Jets to do so. And also, like, the Bills are going to have to drop some games here. But the Bills kind of do that on a yearly basis anyway, so we can maybe expect that. And then I'm like, look, I hate to be mean to Justin Fields here, but I'm just not buying into the fact that this is going to be that sustainable. What have I said in past seasons? The teams I like the least for the long term in a season are the unsustainable winning methods. I think the Steelers are winning unsustainable right now. Like, the defense is good. I'm not saying that defense won't continue to be good, but it's that offense. It's Najee Harris. Once again, he can't get above 4 yards a carry. It's Justin Fields is winning these games without having to make too many throws. At some point down the line, they're going to run into teams here that are going to take advantage of that, because as good as that defense is, even good defenses have off weeks. It's very much possible. And maybe they could be heading into that this week. You never know. So,
I mean, there's a conceivable, just to let you know, there's a conceivable, if you look at the Steelers schedule, they could conceivably go into mid-November at 7-2.
Sure.
Because, after this week against the Colts, they have the Cowboys, which is, I think, their first real test.
Yeah.
But then it's the Raiders, the Jets, probably their second test, and then they play the Giants and the Commanders back-to-back before Baltimore. So they could literally be 7-2 going into week 10.
They could also be 5-4.
They could be. They absolutely could be. But I think they would be favored in those games to be,
True, but I also look at, like, you look at some of the quarterbacks that they've had to face so far. It's stationary Kirk Cousins, stationary Bo Nix, and stationary Justin Herbert. Whereas now they're gonna be facing dual threat quarterbacks in 4 of those 6 games.
Yeah, Richardson hasn't a little bit. Yep.
You have Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
I mean, Daniel Jones can technically move, but I'm not really okay. So 3 of the next 6, to be fair.
Yeah.
So anything's possible, realistically. But I would say I would think 2 of those teams probably have the better chance rather than 3 of them. But it's see when it comes to when you start a season so good, we technically have to like start kneeing in to see how you could fail, because you're 3-0. You are among the best in the league right now, technically speaking. So you've earned this way for us to needle and prod your team to see how you could be failing.
Absolutely.
So I mean that's really a good thing that we're questioning the Steelers right now, because that means they're in a position where we can be questioning them, which I don't think a lot of people would have had that going into this season. So there's that. All right, before we move on to the full Week 3 discussion, and also we'll talk about that Week 4 Thursday night game that Rick apparently had to watch once again. So the Podfather just being forced to watch Thursday Night Football multiple times this season.
It's the worst thing.
Quick recap of this week's hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge. Once again, Justin, our games master, is not here joining us this week, but we were able to make the picks behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen. Rick, I will leave this to you. You are the record keeper, of course. Update the people on the standings so far, and then give everyone the full breakdown of picks for each of us.
Yes. So after a disappointing week in which you only won one game, Jerg, you had 16 points, which actually still gives you the lead, but that lead has shrunk because week to week things are a little peculiar. Justin ended up with 7 points. He missed one game last week, but he's now second place at 15. The Gopher is third. The Gopher's hanging in there. Probably possibly buoyed by the Thursday night game, since we decided to do the show on Thursday night, probably. Gophers at 14 points now. So this is, I think, maybe the latest into a season that we've had our mascot be close to the lead, which is just phenomenal. And I'm at 12 points because I only won one game last week, and it was Seattle over Miami. So I avoided having to go back to Duncan for a second time because
tough weeks for the both of us.
Not pretty at all. And in that aspect, the picks for this week go as follows. Jerg, you at 4 points went with Kansas City. They are playing the Chargers this week. Yep. Favored by 7, so that's not an upset for you. 3 points, you went Washington in a mild upset over Arizona. The Cardinals are favored by 3.5 points. Can't really see why. Jaden Daniels had a great game last week. But
yeah, I was kind of surprised when I saw that. And because everyone knows our lines are brought to us by our friends at ESPN Bet. So that's the lines.
Here to say it, so
yes. If only I could pause, and then from the distance we have him. But we go based off the bet lines, and then I was thinking to myself, it's like, God, am I getting lucky? But maybe it'll flip come the morning when we do the show. But no, it's still the Cardinals being favored, which I'm still kind of surprised by.
Yeah, a bit of a shock there, but I mean, it's what it is at this point. So, and then you actually went back to back. You had another upset that you took. Your 2-pointer was Indianapolis over Pittsburgh. So much credence to your not believing in Justin Fields and friend of the show Mike Tomlin. You're picking the Colts to get their first win over the Steelers to take their first loss at 2 points. So
the Colts are 1-2, to be fair. So
yeah, no one cares about that for that win. And then the other game, the 1-pointer, was Cincinnati, who desperately needs a win against Carolina. If the Bengals go 0-4 to start this season, look out.
There's going to be a lot of questions about that team.
There's a lot of questions, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. Because again, it's not just that you went 0-4 to start the season. Like, you can be forgiven for going 0-4 if you start playing like really good teams. There's only one good team on that roster. The first 4 games, it was the Chiefs.
If they start 0-4, I know I questioned a couple coaches last week, and I very much have every credence to have questioned Sean Payton and John Harbaugh. Zach Taylor is going to quickly be on the head coach hot seat meter.
Well, because if they start 0-4, then you're desperately 0-4 going up against, who's your next opponent? The Ravens.
That is not great. And that's a team that's also desperate because they're going to try to even things out this week to go 2-2. So
they are desperate. They were not picked by any of the humanoids or the mascot. And we'll get to that in just a second. So Justin, with a point separating you and him, he's in second place. He went Houston over Jacksonville at 4 points, which I think is a good pick because the Texans need to bounce back because that offense did not appear in Minnesota at all whatsoever. And Jacksonville, we'll get to how they fared because exactly. 3 points was Detroit in the second Monday night game over Seattle. Not an upset, but again, interesting. I find this week interesting because I feel like Seattle, Detroit, and Jets, Denver are games that we've seen like 2 or 3 years in a row now.
Yeah,
it's very weird. Like, are they now just moving into the same divisions together? Like, what are we doing here, guys? Come on.
Basically.
Justin went for a 2-point upset pick of the Rams over the Bears. And again, how that's an upset pick, I'm not quite sure, but it is. And as one pointer, he actually took both games on Monday night. He picked Tennessee over Miami in another upset, which when he made that pick, to all the fans that are out there, he was questioning himself as he was making the pick.
Yeah. He was like, Titans, question mark? And Rick was like, are you asking or picking?
Picking, question mark?
and then I just come in with the usual joke of like, I'm Ron Burgundy?
Yes. So interesting that he basically goes with the 2 Monday night games to kind of, spare himself of like any further drama from the Sundays, because he's only got 2 1 o'clocks and then nothing in the mid-afternoon, so we can kind of sleep it off and work on Monday night. The Gopher, who's 2 points behind the lead, did not have a 4-point pick this week because we did not do the show before the Dallas Giants game, which is fine, but will be eligible for a point bonus of some variety if if the picks are perfect, because
Well, yeah. If he goes perfect, he gets a +1.
Exactly. So the 3-point upset pick is Buffalo over Baltimore on Sunday Night Football to keep the Bills going for 4-0. And let me tell you something again. If the Bills walk into M&T Bank and win that game, there's more questions coming out of Baltimore too.
Oh, yeah.
And then 2 points, New Orleans over Atlanta. Both teams, I think, need some kind of confidence. And then Green Bay at the 1-pointer over Minnesota. So by the logic that states, that means that we're looking at 1, 2 of the 5 undefeateds keeping their undefeateds going this week based on this. I didn't have a game that involved an undefeated team, so In last place for me, I took the Niners over the Patriots. One of the advantages of being in last place is you get the game that has the biggest spread. So
yep,
I'll take the 10-point favorite 49ers. Look, if the Patriots win this game, I wouldn't be shocked because
because bad luck.
Bad luck. Yeah, bad luck, Fale. Things happen, 3 points for me, Jets over the Broncos, which Justin was not really a fan of. But I mean, again, we're just picking based on wins, not on spreads. Do I think this game could be close? Sure, because I think the Jets will play down to the Broncos, but come on, they'll still win the game. My 2-point upset was my only upset on the board, and I was not happy that this game was remaining, but I had to go for it because I wouldn't want to have a violation happen. Tampa Bay over Philadelphia. Oh boy, it could happen because the Bucs have a very good offense, but I don't know. The Eagles have a little more confidence, I think, now that they won that game. And my 1-pointer, they need to win this game. The Browns over the Raiders, they need to win because again, it's almost funny that if Pittsburgh goes to 4-0, let's say, and every other team in the AFC North loses.
Yeah. Even with my questioning of Justin Fields, that feels like it's way too much to overcome at that point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And especially when you consider the losses of these, because the Ravens, who'd they lose to? They lost to the Chiefs in week 1. They lost to the Raiders in week 2.
Yep.
Which is not the first time in like the last 5 to 6 years they've lost to the Raiders early, by the way.
And they barely beat the Cowboys.
And so if they lose, then that means they're 0-3 against the AFC this week.
Correct.
Like after this week. And the Steelers would then be 4-0. And I think, have they faced an NFC team yet? I think all the Steelers games have been against AFC teams.
No, they started off with the Falcons.
Okay, so they beat the Falcons, but then if they win this week, that makes them 3-0 against the AFC, 3-0 against the AFC, 0-3 against the AFC. It's like that. When you talk about them getting to tiebreakers at the end of the season, the Steelers got you there.
Yeah,
they're already 3 games up.
Records in conference is a ladder tiebreaker. I mean, in division, it's a little tougher to get to that point, but still, having that 3-game leg up is significant. So
yeah, it's feast or famine in the AFC and the NFC this week. So we'll see who feasts and who starves. So survival of the fittest. So fantastic pick challenge update from the Podfather to us. Hopefully not too many more times this has to happen this season, but considering all 3 of us have hectic schedules, especially me coming up over the coming months, it'll be interesting to see. So there's that. All right, Rick, let's move on to the highlights of week 3. And you mentioned the Buccaneers there. Well, let's go to the NFC South and just the rough week the NFC South had, all except for one team, funny enough. We'll get to that team. But in the NFC South, the Eagles lost just a tough game, 15-12. The Eagles beat the Saints in a tough game, 15-12 was the final score. The Saints just losing that one. Just unlike what was the first couple weeks for this team with the offense, was just firing on all cylinders, scored on their first, 11 drives it was? Or 11 drives when it came to the starters. Just could not do that this week. Philly's defense matched them in every way, shape, or form and stepped up. The Buccaneers, destroyed Tampa Bay, basically 26-7. Bo Nix's best game to start. No touchdowns thrown, but 25 of 36, 216 yards, 0 interceptions. It's a very good game for Bo Nix so far this season. And the Atlanta Falcons lost a close one to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, were the Chiefs helped out by the referees? You could say. But the fact of the matter is,
I will, but you could say that.
But the fact of the matter is, the Falcons still lost that game. They fall to 1-3.
Yeah.
So tough games all around, tough losses all around for those three squads there, Rick. And then they go into next week. Funny enough, you mentioned it because you picked a Tampa against Philly. I think that's the game I really want to focus in on, because the Saints-Falcons game, it's almost going to be funny. It's like it's either 3-1 versus 1-3 after it, and the Saints would give themselves a good chance, whereas the Falcons already find their season in jeopardy, or 2-2 after the fact, which I think it'll probably end up being the case. I think Atlanta's like the desperation factor should bring them to win that game, especially because Arthur Blank is being inducted into the Falcons Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, whatever the heck they want to call it.
Oh boy.
How ironic, I think. At least I'm pretty sure he is. I saw that on the headlines and just everyone making a big deal out of it. And I was just like, okay. Don't really care. I mean, when you think about owners that induct themselves, or like people in power inducting themselves into something like that, like in terms of likability, Arthur Blank is one of the more likable ones. I don't blame him for doing that, honestly.
No, listen, he's a solid owner for that franchise and that community, and I think having him in putting himself in the Hall of Fame after whatever, that he didn't do it. It was like, probably suggested to him over years, and he was like, no, I don't want to, and then eventually he's like, all right, fine, put me in, whatever. So
and also
one of those like, no, come on, guys, can't get somebody else? Like, isn't there anybody else? Is Roddy White available? Can't he go into the Ring of Honor now?
Yeah, just put Julio Jones in there already. He's basically retired at this point. And also, when you think about it, like if you're Arthur Blank, a well-respected owner.
Oh, yeah.
For not just his players, but even other players. Because I always harken back to, I think it was J.C. Horn shared like an interaction he had with Arthur Blank, and Arthur Blank just like saying hello to him and like asking about his father, because obviously like the connection there. It's like, it's one of those nice things. Like Arthur Blank's just a good dude. So like the big deal that certain people like made about Arthur Blank being inducted to his own teams, like, come on, worse owners could have happened with worse human beings. Like Arthur Blank is not amongst them.
Well, listen, we're going to have at some point in the next 3 or 4 years David Tepper getting his own Ring of Honor.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to hear that outrage in a couple of years, to say the very least. So there's that. But Falcons Saints, I think that'll probably be a game we more so want to look at the aftermath of when it comes to the division compared to trying to preview it. But Bucs Eagles, I think, is the big game here. They faced twice last season. The Eagles stopped the Buccaneers' early winning streak last year. Could have almost been the same thing this year. The Bucs had started out 3-0, which they would have. But it's going to be a case where both teams are coming in at 2-1. It should be very, very, very intriguing, to say the very least, what this third matchup goes. Because remember, the second time they met in the wild card round, Philly did not look good. They did not look good, to say the very least.
No, and I think the big thing going into this game is the fact that Tampa's run defense is not exactly up to snuff. It's I think that they've allowed Tampa's run. Here's the difference. Tampa's rush offense 91 yards per run per game. Tampa's run defense 137.7 yards allowed rushing. That was last week to Jaleel McLaughlin, Javonte Williams, and some guy named Tyler Beatty, who I've never even heard of. And now you're facing the Eagles, who like to run the ball. I mean, Saquon's been a revelation for this team. He ran for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Saints. If you're the Bucs looking at that game, you know what you have to stop, but can you stop it? I don't know, because like you said, Bo Nix didn't throw a single touchdown pass in this game. Did he need to? No. Like they played well. They had the right turnaround. They had short fields. When Baker got picked off, they had a short field. I think they started at the 9, so that's about as short a field as you can get. And then the Broncos, Will Lutz had 4 field goals, so the defense just kind of wilted. Basically, I mean, that's what 350 yards of total offense for the Broncos last week. Sean Payton knew what to do. And so that game going into this week, the Bucs have to rebound, because what started off as a promising year for them, 2-0, surprise, everyone's like getting ready to have them repeat. You go to 2-2, you bring the rest of the division right back in. The Saints could bounce back this week. The Falcons, if they get a win, they'll be 2-2, and Carolina could be 2-2 after this week. Yeah. So, it's basically just a matter of, if you're the Bucs, you know what you need to do to stop it, but I don't know if you can.
Can you? Yeah. That's the thing.
And again, too, Jalen Hurts, we talked about this Saints defense, this vaunted Saints defense on the other side. Jalen Hurts sliced them for 300 yards passing.
Yeah.
Again, didn't throw a touchdown because I don't know if they opened up the roof, if they put like a little hole and made the field like more unplayable, but it was like 3-0 after going into the fourth quarter.
Right.
And I was just thinking to myself, they were in New Orleans, right? So this doesn't make any sense. So, but yeah, listen, it's a huge game on both sides because the Eagles, if they fall to 2-2, there's gonna be some questions there because this is a game that they're circling as like a game you can win, but then they afterwards then have to play Cleveland, and you saw the Giants carve up that defense. So, it's big wins all around, big games all around for both of these teams. But I think the Eagles have a tougher time too because they were able to kind of limit Derek Carr, but now you're dealing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and this potent passing attack. So it's going to be a fun one. That's going to be a really fun game to look into, I think. And the other game, the Saints Falcons game, they're just going to watch basically and see what happens.
Yeah, essentially. Very intrigued to see what happens with that game. And like you said, I think for me, the ultimate X factor is going to be Saquon in this game because going back to last season, because I remember when we were doing the preview for the Eagles in our NFC East preview, Justin mentioned the importance of running game because he mentioned DeAndre Swift last year. So I quickly looked while you were talking about it, is that DeAndre Swift early last season had 2 games of well over 100 yards, and against the Bucs was one of those games. After week 3 last year, DeAndre Swift only had 2 more games the rest of the season where he had 80 or more rushing yards. The consistency that Philly needs from their running backs in order to get back to what they looked at the start of last season is critical. And Saquon is providing that so far. He's been good. Third down catch that didn't go well aside, we all agree that shouldn't have even been the play call to begin with.
No.
Because if Philly had taken the points earlier, they could have taken the points then. Bada bing, bada boom, Atlanta would have had no shot.
Oh, well, but also if you run the ball, Atlanta didn't have a timeout, so therefore the clock would have run down a little bit further.
Exactly, which is less time, and et cetera. Although the decision ultimately helped me win week 2 of my fantasy that week. So, keep doing what you're doing, Philly. But
you lost and then you won, and then you lost and then you won because of
Yeah, I stacked
errors.
Weird, but I am 2-1 because I lost last week very badly. But ultimately, the big thing is that if, like you mentioned, if it's the battle of the defenses this week, which defense will look better this week? Because Philly, in certain instances so far in this young season, the passing defense has kind of looked bad, and Devin White hasn't had as big of a role as I thought he was going to have on this team. Former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, funny enough, the Philly's passing defense, Cousins smoked him. He just sliced and diced him. The rushing attack for Green Bay helped, but Jordan Love looked pretty good in that week 1. I think we could all say, this is going to be a question of which defense is going to falter. Is Tampa's run defense going to look bad and Saquon's going to run all over them, or is Philly's pass defense going to look less than again, and is Chris Godwin and Mike Evans going to do the job? So I think to me it's going to be the battle of defenses, who steps up versus who falters, and this one is going to be the top story, the deciding factor. Let's get to Carolina though, like you said. 36-22 victory in Vegas against the Raiders last week for the Carolina Panthers. 319 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Deontay Johnson, 8 catches, 122 yards and a touchdown. Chuba Hubbard, 114 yards rushing. This team, and Hubbard also added 55 yards receiving plus a touchdown. I unfortunately faced Chuba Hubbard in fantasy this past week, so it wasn't a good week for me to say the very least. Carolina, for what looked like a aimless, no idea what was happening team, looked really good in week 3.
Well, you buried the lead, though.
Yep.
You didn't mention Andy Dalton was the starting quarterback.
I did. I said 319 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, but you didn't say by who.
True.
I thought you were going to do something really cool, you thought Bryce Young did that? No, it was Andy Dalton.
Yeah. So
Bryce Young didn't suddenly turn the switch on and become a better quarterback because Alabama quarterbacks don't do that thing. Come on now.
no, well, Bryce Young did have probably 20 high fives and 15 pats on the back to his teammates. So.
I can imagine him missing all the high fives like that Tom Brady gif.
Oh, come on.
Come on now. Listen, and you know what was funny? This game was over immediately. Like the 36-22 scoreline is misleading because it was 33-7 at one point. Like, this was a letdown effort by the Raiders defense. After the high of coming back and winning that game against the Ravens, to basically go out and lay a stinker against the worst thing, the laughing side, the semi-pro team masquerading as an NFL team in Charlotte. Not ideal for them. I think, are there questions now about Gardner Minshew? I suppose, but I mean, Aiden O'Connell looked good, but can you maybe try and do a 2-quarterback set in the NFL? I mean, that could be a possibility thing. You have Marvin Lewis there, so maybe he can make things work. But this is, I think, the thing. This is what happens when you have a pro-style quarterback who can work really well with an offensive set. Dave Canales, a lot of things he did last year in Tampa worked because Baker Mayfield was able to understand them and make them work. He wasn't trying to do too much. He wasn't overmatched. Listen, I'll say this. If this is the start of something, this is the start of the Andy Dalton reclamation project because he's going to become a superstar quarterback now under Dave Canales. Maybe we're not giving Dave Canales enough credit for being as good of an offensive-minded head coach as he could be. Because you mentioned it. Johnson had 122 yards. Hubbard had 169 all-purpose in this game. Obviously, look, the injury to Adam Thielen aside, because that is going to be something you have to deal with if you're Carolina. The fact of the matter is this was the best game the Panthers have had, I think, since the Jake Delhomme era or the Cam Newton era. And if it continues, they may be a more dangerous team than people realize. But it's funny to say that one player changes everything, but a good quarterback maybe does the job because Andy Dalton looked pretty damn good.
Yeah, very, very good to say the least. And, this Panthers-Bengals game is going to be something to watch out for because, like you said, the Panthers, they could be let back in this division. They win 2 in a row. They make Cincy drop down to 0-4. That'd be rough to say the least for Cincy. But they get back to 2-2. Maybe Tampa loses this week, and then the Falcons win. Every team in that division is dead set at 2-2. And it's a whole new ball game. And me and Justin will be very upset that we predicted a Panthers good season just 1 year too early, it seems, with the wrong quarterback as well.
How could you?
How could we?
Also, by the way, shout out to Eddie Pinheiro. He's now 5-5 on field goals this year. 3 made last week. So good for
Attaboy, Eddie. Attaboy. All right. Let's go to, as the title shows, Rick, is Sam Darnold has he overcome the curse of the Jets drafting him highly and being a USC quarterback and being on the Carolina Panthers? And is he going to win the MVP award this year?
Well,
I mean, probably not, but he started out the season well. The Minnesota Vikings are 3-0. Sam Darnold in the first couple of weeks of the season looked like the only quarterback that was able to pass the ball consistently, considering how slow of a start passing has gotten to this season. 657 yards on the season, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 4 touchdowns in the air against Houston, no interceptions, sub 200 passing yards, but he didn't need to do it because Aaron Jones also stepped up with 102 rushing yards in his own right. Look, Brian Flores was able to get to C.J. Stroud and co. 2 interceptions against him. It's been a while since C.J. Stroud's had a bad game like that. It's last year. I can't even think to when last season he even threw 2 interceptions on the season because he was very good all of last year. His total stat line last year, he threw 5 interceptions on the season.
Yep.
Like he was efficient. He was good. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this might be, if it's not his first career multi-pick game, it's the first he's had in a while. It is not his first career multi-pick game. 3 of them came in a single game last year against, do you want to guess the game, Rick?
I don't, no.
It was against Arizona, funny enough.
Oh, okay.
That's that defense out of all of them last year. But yeah, so second career multi-interception game of the season for C.J. Stroud. Like, Minnesota as a complete team looked good, and we mentioned them earlier. How legit are they at 3-0? I don't know, but
so that's where you got to take this win with a little bit of a grain of salt, though, because
what about pepper? What about grain pepper?
Sure. How about cardamom? I need any spice you want. The thing with the Texans is that we kind of glossed over this a little bit, but I think Justin might have brought it up, or maybe you did, is that having Joe Mixon there is good until he gets hurt and you don't have anybody behind him, because Dameon Pierce didn't play either. Mixon was out, Pierce was out. And so Cam Akers, who has not looked the same since the Rams days, had 21 yards on the ground to lead them. So basically the Texans, now again, they were down 14-0 after the first quarter. I get it. They couldn't get the offense to the rhythm. But when you don't have your top options there in the backfield, you're making Stroud throw constantly. And that was the problem, because once that was the game plan, the Vikings knew how to tailor their defense for him. On the other side, the Vikings, it's not only Sam Darnold throwing 4 touchdowns that they moved the ball out well. How about Aaron Jones, man? How about the game that he had? 19 carries, 102 yards as well, 5 catches, 46 in a score. Like, he's blossomed into a really complete player that he was in Green Bay. He's made it even further in Minnesota. Yeah, I mean, this Minnesota team looks really good. Can it be sustainable? I don't know. That's the thing, is that I don't really know. And if it's Sam Darnold, Jets fans like Justin and myself will, be gritting our teeth and thinking to ourselves, what in, how did this happen? I mean, we think we know how it happened. I'm blaming Adam Gase, but I mean, it's more like, where was this in New York when we needed it? But yeah, I mean, let's see. This is their first real test coming up, because I don't know if I saw this. Are the Packers back to using Jordan Love, or is Malik Willis still their QB1 this week? I saw a change on fantasy that Willis's points went down to 0, so I think he's the backup now. I'm not sure if Jordan Love is fully back though.
According to 19 hours ago from Rob Domofsky's new week, saying questionable tag for QB Jordan Love. Okay. Let me quickly search up just to confirm.
Yeah. I mean, while you're doing that, I'll talk about the rest of this, because I mean, again, it's interesting how they're spreading the ball around too. Like,
he's listed as questionable, by the way, Jordan Love. Okay. So
yeah, so Darnold,
that is an upgrade.
Darnold's able to find Justin Jefferson, and then they're making other guys become that secondary, tertiary option, because they don't have Jordan Addison, right now. So, Jalen Naylor caught a touchdown. Johnny Munt caught, because they don't have Hawkinson either. So, Darnold's finding his way. He's finding the right ability, and they're making this work. I mean, we saw 2 weeks ago with that 97-yard touchdown strike. You put the guy in his place, and he can make things work. And this Vikings D is solid too. Like I said, they're not flashy, but they're doing enough to be able to get into the right spots, make the plays. 5 sacks yesterday, 3 by the former Texan Jonathan Greenard. I mean, come on, that's surprising. So, like I said, it was an interesting game, but I don't want to look too much into it right now, only because the Texans didn't have their full accoutrement of weapons there, and the Vikings. We'll see if the bubbles still last after this week, because.
Yeah, Tank Dell, by the way, reported to be out this week, so and that's a tough one for Houston to say the very least, because Tank Dell, going back to last season, rookie season that was going great, cut off by injury, and then he's just not a great start to him early in this campaign.
Yeah, I think unfortunately he's starting to become the odd guy out too, because you saw Nico Collins become the dominant force last year, and now that they have Diggs.
Yeah. So that always happens at the end of the day. Wide receiver always does find like their touches and targets lower. It's unfortunate that's Tank Dell. It's unfortunate because I have him on fantasy too. So yeah,
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. All right. Looking at it, we kind of mentioned the Bengals. We talked a lot. I feel like we've said almost everything to say about the Bengals going into week 4. Just mentioned Commanders Bengals game. I forget the stat off the top of my head. That was the first game since the 1940s that a score on every single drive, no punts, and no turnovers between the Commanders and Bengals. I think that was the stat. The Commanders won that game. But according to some people, it's all Joe Burrow's fault for the fact that the Commanders scored 38 points on that defense. So how dare defensive end / linebacker / cornerback Joe Burrow let up 38 points to the Washington Commanders? How dare you, Joe? I
mean, he can't. He has to do everything, right? That's what it is.
When Zach Taylor's the head coach, yes.
I also felt bad for. I mean, not really, but like you think about it, Tress Way and Ryan Recco had like the easiest nights. They didn't even get off the bench.
Yeah.
Maybe kickoffs if they were doing kickoffs, but I don't know if they were doing that. Like they just sit there. McPherson, I think, does kickoffs for the Bengals. I don't know if Seibert does them for the Commanders, but still, like, barely even there. Like, you guys had an easy work day. Yeah, right. Again, Burrow throws 3 touchdowns and throws 324 yards, and they don't win because this defense, this vaunted Bengals defense with Trey Hendrickson, who only had 1 tackle and 1 sack in this game, Jermaine Pratt 9 tackles was fine. It was interesting to see how Washington just had their way, moved around.
Yep.
It was interesting to see Jaden Daniels kind of be this really, really strong rookie. It's almost surprising. It's almost like you wish that he was taken number 1. It's almost like we have 2 years in a row where the number 1 overall pick shouldn't have been taken number 1 overall.
Indeed, to say the very least. Like, now, Jaden Daniels now is coming into his own, and the fact that I think the big thing for me with this game for Washington was the fact that Daniels was able to finally get a strike with McLaurin. That was a big one right there, because if he could finally get a bit of a rapport going with the guy that's supposed to be the number 1 on that team, that's big to say the very least. If you're a Washington Commanders fan, and if you're Washington in general, because the 2-1 start to the season, they're on top of the division at this point.
Yes, they are.
And yeah, if you're Cincy, this is the tough part for Cincy. Like you mentioned, Burrow's only sacked 2 times. Secondly, of course, there are pressures and stuff like that, but just looking at the final stats, he was only sacked twice. He threw 0 interceptions. The running backs both were very good. Chase Brown, 7 carries, 62 yards. Zach Moss, 12 carries for 58 yards. Both of them at an extremely efficient clip. Jamar Chase finally got over 100-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Took long enough. This is the game that they've been waiting on, and it just, like you said, the defense completely faltered for them. Like, if you want to say in the first 2 weeks, it's more on the offense. Agreed. Although Cincy also got really unlucky with some poor officiating at the end of that game against the Chiefs. Like, they had him on 4th down and forced that incompletion, but it was a BS pass interference call that gave the Chiefs the win. Game 1 is probably the definitive, like, what are you doing only scoring 10 points against the Patriots? This isn't Bill Belichick still there, but
correct.
Such is life. So Cincy, good luck this week is all we can say.
I must also say too that the punters were on the field. They were the holders for their respective field goals and extra points. There we go. They didn't do anything else. Good job holding the ball, guys.
All right. Speaking of holding, Ravens held on, but barely. They were up 28-6 after a Derrick Henry 26-yard run, which, by the way, Derrick Henry 151 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns on 25 carries. Look what happens when you finally give an all-pro caliber running back the touches.
Isn't it just beautiful?
Isn't it just beautiful when you commit to something and don't stray away from it 15 times?
Right. Yeah.
But that still didn't stop the fact that the Dallas Cowboys made a God's honest effort to try to come back in the 4th quarter, and they did. It got to 28-25, but they were just unable to finish out the comeback. After their touchdown, the Ravens were able to hang on. And the Ravens, if I'm not mistaken, I'm just double-checking it here, they only had 1 third down on that final possession for them. And they finished it with a completion to Zay Flowers to get the first down. So ultimately, it was literally a hold-on effort for Baltimore.
Yeah.
But the fact that this still almost blew a 22-point lead is not great. And again, this team is just you can't hold on to the 4th quarter, and you're going to need to fix that when it comes to this next game against the Bills. So let's go to the Bills here, Rick.
Yeah.
47-10 victory against the Jaguars. Destroyed Jacksonville.
Yep.
And now they have a game here. You want to talk about games it feels like we've seen a lot over the last couple of years? Bills-Ravens. It feels like it's that. And, it's Lamar Jackson, it's Josh Allen. It's these 2 solid defenses going against each other. I want to give a shout out to the Bills defense so far, because coming into the season with the walking wounded, because once again, not having Matt Milano, not having the same secondary that they had for so many years, they've really stepped up. Now, granted, it's not been the toughest competition so far, but they've still had to get the wins. So, well, actually, to be fair, the Dolphins game, but then 2 went out. So, irregardless, this Bills team's looking good. This Ravens team finally just got their first win. How? And I mentioned it feels like so many of John Harbaugh's bad 4th down or 4th and goal decisions come against the Bills of all teams. Because remember, a couple of years ago, it wasn't a 4th and goal. I think it was a 2-point conversion attempt, and they just fumbled the ball away.
Yeah,
there's just something about the Bills that it gets Harbaugh.
Yeah,
and if you're Buffalo, you have to be walking into this week with all the confidence in the world against Baltimore.
I would say so. I mean, they are clearly just firing on all cylinders, and they're Their offense is grooving. The defense has only allowed 10 points in both the last 2 games, so their defense is doing really, really solid work. And everything just seems to be going the right way for them. I mean, it's not the stats don't jump out to you from like a rushing attack wise, but that's because last week the Bills knew that the passing game would work out better because the Jaguars just did not know how to defend it. I mean, Allen threw 4 touchdowns in I think almost like the first half, basically. And so once that was it, all you have to do is just run the ball a little bit here and there and make the Jaguars try and come back. But they couldn't do that. And so, Baltimore's an interesting team, man, because I think you almost had one onside kick from the Cowboys that worked, and then they scored a touchdown, and then a second one that almost worked. And then if you're Baltimore, this is what I don't understand. If you're Baltimore, when that happens, the second onside kick, and you have the ball now in the fourth quarter, you go 3 and out? What are these play calls? They're not inspired. Like, I get it. You're up by 10, but you're on the Dallas side of the ball. You have Justin Tucker, and I get maybe you don't want him trying a long field goal for a position or whatever, but like, this is your chance to close the door officially. Like, Dallas is pesky. They're coming back, and what do? Derrick Henry, first down carry for 6. Fine, good. Yep, that's good. Second down, Derrick Henry for 1 up the middle. Okay, I mean, don't run the ball at the middle, but, whatever, that's fine. They're third and three. How about a nice little gadget play to the outside? How about a nice little, Justice Hill run or something? No, we're going to try and find Mark Andrews. Incomplete. So 4th down. What do? I'm going to punt the ball away to Dallas. Give them the ball at their own 9-yard line. They just go, 91 yards for a touchdown. Like, I know it's a 3-point game. Really? John Harbaugh. So that's
what I'm saying. There's something about game situations that Harbaugh just like. I read the stat last week. He has the most. What is it? Most double-digit. Was it second half or fourth quarter blown leads now? It's not good. It's just not good. And like he's going up against like a team in Buffalo that last year was not a banner year for the Bills, to say the very least. Like it's almost like the script has been flipped to where it's the Ravens now having these offensive issues that the Bills were having last year. And it's the Bills that are starting off as the extremely hot team.
Right.
Like, yeah, and if you're Baltimore, like this is obviously you finally made the AFC title game last year with Lamar. You got a monkey off the back in terms of finally making it that deep with him.
Yep.
But now you need to overcome these who would have thought in the AFC North, because remember, Rick, at the end of last season, there was the press conference where the reporter asked Mike Tomlin about his contract and he just walked off, which again, Mike Tomlin, come on. But who would have thought that, this time 5-6 months ago, we were talking about, like, some people were questioning Mike Tomlin's future, and now it's every other coach in the AFC North whose future is being questioned.
Yeah.
Because it's not great to say the very least. Even Sean McDermott going into this season, there were questions about him, and he started off 3-0.
Yeah. It's funny how a good start to a season can wipe away all those questions, whereas a really bad start to the season can
brings back questions.
Brings back the questions, exactly. When you have a team that just doesn't perform up to the level that you're expecting, or anything like that, it's really just interesting to kind of see where your thoughts go, But I mean, like I said, McDermott and Tomlin 3-0. I think even. Maybe not so much Mike McDonald, but I think Minnesota, I know we talked about them, but Minnesota, they were able to quelch some of the talk because I think Kevin O'Connell, after the way that last year went, after the way that the playoffs went the year prior, may have faced some rumblings, but you start off 3-0 with Sam Darnold and the way that they were starting off, I think that quieted all the doubters, at least for the moment. But you're right.
And also, to be fair, I think what this really buys for Kevin O'Connell in particular is the fact that he's doing this without the guy they drafted in the first round. Like you can't.
Well, one of the guys. Because they had 2 picks. Yeah.
True. But you can't dump O'Connell after this year now because it'll be right now. You have a full season of JJ McCarthy learning the playbook and watching Sam Darnold operate. Yeah. Whereas, let's say the Vikings do have a terrible end to the year and they end up missing the playoffs and they go let's say 8-9 or something. It wouldn't do McCarthy good in his development if you switch the playbook on him going into what'll be his first year of playing, but his second year in the NFL. I think this start has kind of bought Kevin O'Connell. If there were any questions going into this year, I think it basically bought him until next year, if not even past that.
I would say so. I think I look at it like I look at it like this. I look at it as, yeah, you drafted the kid in the first round and he's hurt, so you have a year of like plus time basically. Kind of like Michael Penix in a way, but he's not being hurt, just being drafted by a terrible team. And so, that this kind of allows you that opportunity because O'Connell seems like the offensive genius now that he was a couple of years ago when it was Captain Kirk. Captain Checkdown, as we like to call him on the show.
Fourth down, check down to TJ Hawkinson. Works every time.
Gotta love it. But yeah, it's funny that like you have that side of it, and then the other side of it where you have all these questions. Not even Zach Taylor, not even Stefanski or John Harbaugh. Jacksonville, Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
And something that you said.
We're gonna hit them once we finish this.
I know, but something that you said during our like preseason shows. All of a sudden, the minute that this offense gets predictable, they are toast.
Yep.
And in this game in particular, it's bad. It's a bad look when Mac Jones is a better QBR than Trevor Lawrence does.
Yeah.
Even though it was like by 1 point, it's still a better QBR than your number 1 overall pick starting quarterback who survived Urban Meyer.
It happens every single time.
To a girl of the NFL coaching industry. Yeah.
I think she has more staying power than him and is somehow more likable, funny enough. Like, that's the thing. And I said this, dude, this happened in Philly. Like, Doug Peterson is just one of those coaches where he has his ways, and once it gets known, the quarterback play is going to suffer. Look what happened to Carson Wentz. Now, granted, some of that on Carson Wentz, yes. But look what happened to Carson Wentz's drastic drop-off from MVP to decent starting quarterback to full-time backup in this league. It's a disservice to say that that's fully on him. Doug Peterson has to take some accountability there because he was a part of that. And now you look at Trevor Lawrence, who, like, let's look at it. First year Doug Peterson, that new coach smell, you're away from Urban Meyer. First season of his career getting over 4,000 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions thrown, even 5 touchdowns on the ground for him, right? Next year, okay, you barely get over 4,000 passing yards. You threw a couple more interceptions, 14, 21 touchdowns. But you not missed a couple games because it technically says he played 16. But we know he got hurt a couple times. He ended up having to exit games in like the third and fourth quarter. Like, okay, you could kind of be like, well, you know what? There's something you could bounce back from that. He's not bounced back from that. And they paid him. Like this is the thing that needs to be understood. Like, and because I was making the argument with Kevin O'Connell before, I do feel like in all leagues now, this isn't just NFL exclusive. Like, certain coaches are getting too short of a leash when they don't deserve it. Like, you do need to give coaches time to build up, and you need to give them plenty of leeway. But there are certain coaches where they don't deserve that leeway. There are certain coaches where you can clearly and obviously tell it's not going to get better from this point forward. And I think we're going to approach that very soon here with Doug Peterson. Because now let's move on to the other part of this game. Because I think we said everything about Bills-Ravens going into that matchup. Let's look at the other side of this. Jacksonville Jaguars, 0-3. They're going to face Houston here. Lost to the Dolphins 2017. You can make the argument, decent Dolphins defense to start the year. Tua was there. Low-scoring game. You'll figure it out. 18-13. Lost to the Browns. That Browns team is just not good. No. And that Browns defense is honestly, like, even though it's looked fine on paper, not as impressive as it felt last year, especially with Myles Garrett now might be day to day or week to week, considering he got a little bit banged up at the end of the Giants game. A more than winnable game there. And then we were talking about this last week because the last couple times Jacksonville's faced Buffalo, actually, Jacksonville has done well against them. Like, they beat them in London a couple years ago. That was Urban Meyer's first win. And then I don't know if it was last year or in Doug Peterson's first year, they faced the Bills again and they beat them. Like, this Jags team has actually had the Bills a number on a handful of occasions here with Trevor Lawrence. Because even you go before that, when the Bills made the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor, the Jalen Ramsey and Blake Bortles Jaguars team destroyed them. Yeah. So the Jaguars have kind of like had their, not way with the Bills, but they've beaten them. But not this time. Buffalo just completely overpowered them, overruled them, dominated them. Josh Allen, 4 touchdowns, passing. James Cook with if you're Jacksonville going into this game against Houston right now, with Houston, we all probably think more likely to bounce back. Indy has a chance to get a win here. They could even things up for themselves. Tennessee's Tennessee. Nobody cares about Tennessee. But, true. The Jags are very much in a situation here where their season could be lost after the first month. And apparently the report before you go, the
God.
report that Shad Khan, this is the angriest he's ever been with the organization about the performances and stuff. Now, it's funny because like Shad Khan, this is not the first time that $200 million or so of your money's wasted. Just look at your son and the wrestling company that he's running. But now he's upset on the football side, finally.
Oh, Ray Phoenix.
Yeah.
Do you know, by the way, the 3 least efficient offensive teams in the NFL right now based upon points per game?
Off the top of my head, I'd imagine Jacksonville's got to be one of the 3 if you're mentioning it.
Jacksonville's 3rd. Jacksonville only has 13.3 points per game scored.
Jesus.
Now, New England has 13 even.
Yeah.
And Miami has 11 even. But again, take Miami with a grain of salt because
Tua's hurt, yeah.
Right. Is that what you expected from Trevor Lawrence? No. So that's what the problems are. The problems, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, you've got weapons.
Yep.
I know Ingram's kind of been hit or miss, but Brenton Strange is there. You've got weapons on offense, and you're only scoring 13 points per game. That's not a winning formula. So, and you think it's going to continue against Houston? You think they're going to be able to change that against the Texans? I don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not.
That Texans defense, like obviously the Minnesota game, an outlier, has been pretty solid to start the year as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch, see what happens with this Jaguars team moving forward. But not looking good so far.
It's not looking good indeed. All right, kind of last notes here we could bring up about week 3. The Jets beat the Patriots, Rick, in a sizable margin. So finally the Jets can lord over the Patriots' corpse. It took a while, but it's finally happening.
Yes.
We mentioned the Giants beating the Browns. Like if you're Cleveland, just oof. Just oof. The Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams, a winnable game that they just were unable to get the victory in at the end of the day. Roma Dunze went over the century mark in terms of yards in that game, so good for them. And the Seahawks, I mean, we mentioned they're 3-0. They're 3-0 in part because they beat the Dolphins.
Right.
And I guess last note, Detroit Lions, they got the win against the Cardinals, but it wasn't the most confident win. Another interception thrown by Jared Goff. Montgomery got over a century mark there. So it's very interesting with some of the teams now. Like certain teams are doing fine. Like Detroit was able to bounce back after their loss against Tampa, but they're still not looking the way that we thought they would to start the season. But we'll see if maybe that's just like a little bit of a hangover from last year, and like this team is going to pick up some steam here very soon.
It's funny to me too that as we're talking about them, like the Cardinals were a couple of drives away from being one of those 3-0 teams. If you think about
honestly, yeah.
So maybe there's something to.
They very much threatened Buffalo, and if they had a better defense, because the Cardinals were up 17-3, and then the Bills scored 21 points in a row to make it 24-17.
Yep.
And the Cardinals could have won that game. Maybe if they throw it to Maserati Marv a little bit more in that first game, they start 1-0.
Well, I think they're learning that now. I mean, I don't know it's not Kyle's responsibility to throw the ball and figure out who to throw the ball to, but it's I think they're learning that now. I mean, he made 5 catches for 64 in the game against Detroit.
He's doing good.
Yeah. Well, he was thrown to 11 times. So maybe it's also Marv, Like if you don't catch the ball 6 times out of 11 times that you're thrown to, you're not going to get thrown to. Ask Quentin Johnson. He knows.
All right. Let us talk about the Thursday night game now, because I feel like we've said everything we want to about week 3. Let's quickly look at week 4 and what was Thursday night football. And you saw this game, Rick, so you can give credence to this. Daniel Jones, 281 yards, 1 interception. Devin Singletary, 14 carries, only 24 yards. But Malik Neighbors once again doing well, going over the century mark, 115 receiving yards for him, 12 catches. Dak Prescott, kind of a damage limitation game for him. 221 yards, 2 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, 98 yards and a score. Like Dallas did what they had to do, and their defense kind of just handled the job here, just stopping the Giants and making them have to make mistakes and punt the ball and do all sorts of things. And of course, I must note that even though he only threw one interception, that interception was after a missed Cowboys field goal. So there was a chance there at the end of the game where Danny Dimes, granted there was less than a minute left to be fair to him, to be extremely fair, but the interception was still thrown. So
they didn't score, and they haven't scored a touchdown at home this season. And here's the thing that I'm watching too.
The Giants, for the people, just to clarify for the people.
As I'm watching this game, here's the thing that I'm watching. I gotta tell you the truth. Daniel Jones cannot throw the ball down the field. Because I don't know if you remember earlier in this game, there was that the Cowboys jumped off sides and they had a free play. Jones heaved one up, and I know it was a free play, so it didn't really matter. It was criminally underthrown towards Slayton. And this ball to where Neighbors was at the end of the game was underthrown too. Like, if you're a quarterback in this league and you cannot throw the ball down the field, you're no better than Chad Pennington. And after a certain while, Chad Pennington lost his luster. So it's not a surprise to me that the Giants only had 5 field goals. But the secondary thing that I thought too, this Cowboys run defense was not very good. And then the Giants designed really not very unique or selective plays for their running attack. I mean, look, I understand that he's a rookie, and I understand that, you want to try and get a change of pace back, but Tyrone Tracy is not the answer, and neither is Eric Gray. I mean, I'll tell you, last year when they had Saquon Barkley, and I know that he was hurt for a bit, they had better change of pace backs behind him. Matt Breida and Gary Brightwell were way better than Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy were. So with Singletary there, who gets the ball 14 times on the ground and only runs for 24, if you have a Brightwell or a Breida there to kind of change the pace and be better, they're going to be a better team running. And yeah, it's disappointing because this is a game that, for all intents and purposes, the Cowboys didn't win this game. They put up more points, so they won it that way, but the Giants didn't do enough to win this game either. Like, they had an opportunity plenty of times to put points on the board, to get aggressive, to right some wrongs, and it just didn't happen because the really bad play calling by Brian Daboll. I know going into the year, that was the talk, was that he was taking the play calling away from Kafka, and he was going to be the guy making the play calls. Find somebody else. Get a third guy in there. Bring somebody else back in here. Like, where's Ray Handley? Bring him back, or something like that. Like where are those guys? Because this is not good, and it's not surprising to me that Brian Daboll is on the hot seat now, 3 weeks in. It's really not surprising to me.
Yeah, it's tough to say, and like it's funny. Like, I always find it as a cliche, but dang, it just represents this game so well. The Cowboys technically won the game, but they didn't really win the game. The Giants lost this game, so it's not great. Again, barring winning 13, 14 in a row and then winning the Super Bowl this year, Daniel Jones is not long for New York.
And it's funny to me too that one of the other critiques that they mention, that always is mentioned whenever the Cowboys and Giants play, the Cowboys get all the calls. They get all the calls. They get no penalties on them. The Cowboys had 11 penalties called against them for 89 yards. Giants had 4.
Yeah. This was literally a game for the Giants to win.
So I think what happened was, just to kind of further that conspiracy theory, get that Podfather Conspiracies bottom tab underneath there. To further that, the Cowboys got all the random calls that didn't really matter so much called against them, whereas the Giants had the calls that were the most detrimental calls against them, and that's where everyone's complaining. Look at the disparity. The Cowboys had 11 penalties called against them, but none of them mattered because the Giants didn't score any points, whereas those 4 calls were ticky-tack, and that's why CeeDee Lamb was able to score a touchdown. Like, really? Come on now. Like, we have certain teams will get the narrative of that, the Chiefs being one of them, the Cowboys being the other one, but all you have to do is just peel behind the label a little bit further and see your offense stinks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's not great. And honestly, and hey, I've said this, and this is why I've been a big proponent to running backs on the show, and this is why I've been big on it. You can't always just substitute in running backs and think the production's going to stay.
Right.
Talent discrepancy is there, and Saquon Barkley is more talented than the entire Giants running back room put together. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I feel bad for saying that because I actually do like Devin Singletary a good bit. I feel he's a decent running back, but this is what happens when all the pressure is put on a guy. It's like it's like if a pitcher is a good number 4 on his team and he has a career year and now he's getting paid to be a 1 or a 2. Or in hockey sometimes, Rick, when we see a backup goalie have a run and he's paid by a team to become their starter and then he doesn't perform as well, like his stats aren't there, it's like, well, what happened? He's just, you're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy. Devin Singletary is just not a number 1 running back in this league. He's just not. And I feel bad to say that about him, but it's also not on him for being that by design because that was the Giants' decision. Like, it's just the fact of the matter that talent discrepancy exists at every position, and it's not just a simple, you plug this guy in, oh, Devin Singletary can do for this team what Saquon did 2 seasons ago. No, because Saquon's just more talented. Like, the talent discrepancy in this league. You see how much better the Minnesota Vikings running attack is this season because Aaron Jones is way better than what Alex Madison was last year.
Yeah.
And he's probably not probably, I think he has way more juice left in the tank than Dalvin Cook does at this point because Dalvin Cook looks shot. Oh my God.
I feel like sometimes running backs can be con artists in a way. Like, you're brought in under the prospect of you can slide into the offense pretty easily. But if your running style is not the same as the guy who was there before you, like you're saying, then it's definitely a change. Like look at the Raiders now. Like Josh Jacobs was a hard-nosed running back, and Alex Madison and Zamir White are not those guys. When you brought up hockey, were you referring to Jordan Binnington by chance?
Actually, he was like the third name on the list for me. The first one was Anton Hudobin.
Oh, okay.
And remember the Bubble Cup run for Dallas.
Yep.
And then he is the backup now in Ottawa, but what's his name? Forsberg?
Yeah.
Is his name? Yeah. Like two seasons ago for Ottawa, he did like really good for them, and he was entering last year as a starter. And I was listening to podcasts being like, oh, they have. I think Anton Forsberg is it. Anton Forsberg. They're like, oh, Anton Forsberg. Da da da. And I'm like, guys, he's a backup. Like, why do we think Ottawa's going to do because a backup is now? There's like, what? I mean, they also signed Jonas Corposalo, so that was a bit of a flaw.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Singletary too, and I think that he's a very good running back. He's not at the level of certain other running backs that are there, but he's serviceable when he's behind the right line and when he's able to, play the right way. But
and also, to be fair to him, when you can only trust the quarterback so much, the defenses are going to zero in on that running attack.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things where, again, 2 seasons ago, Daniel Jones, the Giants did not make the playoffs because Daniel Jones became a good quarterback. Yeah. The Giants made the playoffs 2 seasons ago, among other things, because they were able to hide Daniel Jones enough. And a lot of guys have been hired in this league because they hid the quarterback a bunch and they were able to mitigate and limit the issues of that quarterback throwing to it. Remember Mark Trestman in Chicago? I think it was either his first year there or when he was like OC the year before. I forget exactly what it was, but he was being like lauded for the help he provided Jay Cutler and stuff. And it's like, Jay Cutler didn't get better. He just threw less picks, which, yes, in theory is an art to be able to do for quarterbacks. But it's the eye test of like Daniel Jones didn't throw less picks because he suddenly became a gunslinger and he became Aaron Rodgers or Mahomes-esque. No, he just threw less picks because they were smarter in the shots they were taking, and they won more like 50-50 balls that year than you probably expected. Like it's one of those things where that's part of why Singletary, like you mentioned, like running style and Daniel Jones just not being there. Because again, when I look at running style, the number one example in the NFL I always go to is when DeMarco Murray led the league in rushing for the Cowboys, left to Philly the year before, and that was the Chip Kelly Eagles, by the way. And he went to full force north-south running style of Dallas versus send the guys out there in the backfield to catch the ball 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage and then take it up. That was never DeMarco Murray. Yeah, no wonder it didn't work in Philly because that was never going to work in that style. I think even I'm forgetting his name now. Miles Sanders with his last year in Philly, how good he was, then going to Carolina. I think hindsight 2020 with what he was with the Panthers last year and even this year, it's just like his style is not conducive to what they're trying to do with the running backs there. So it's just one of those things where this happens. But I even don't think it's necessarily that for Singletary. I just think it is ultimately the fact that he is being asked to do what Saquon did a couple years ago. And the problem is that Daniel Jones is just not gotten better. He has not progressed.
Yeah. It's interesting too that the running back, like these running back positions change so frequently. And, it's almost like when you're playing a video game and the video game is like a battle game, let's say, and you have a fighter versus a bruiser or a fighter versus a specialist or anything like that. Like, fighters can do well against bruisers, let's say. So let's say, Barkley in that offense can do well against a bruising defense. But when the fighter becomes a specialist who's not really known for that sort of thing and you still run that same offense out there, these are the results you have. So it's interesting. Like, it's funny that the OCs don't get changed as often as the running backs do, I guess because there's less money involved, but like they should. I'm telling you, Giants, if this week is a harbinger for them because, going into their next matchup, the next game that they have, they need to really look at this offense and figure out the issues because it's not going to be pretty. They are You want to talk about a game that we've seen in years past? They're going to Seattle next week. We've seen that before. And we saw what happened, and we know why it happened.
Yeah.
And who would say it won't happen again?
Very much so. Very much so. All right. Podfather, I think we've done a really good job recapping the past week or so of NFL football. We'll be back here next time to recap this next week of NFL football.
Yay.
And we'll see how we break it down, because we're going to be a month in. It's always interesting once we reach these little milestones in the season, like a month in, trade deadline, 6 games remaining now. It's so difficult now because it's a freaking 17-game regular season to do that. It used to be 4-4-4-4. Why did we go away from the symmetry? But with that being said, let's end the show off right. A rant and Rostrum podium. Take us home.
We have to end it this way. We didn't end it with this way last week. So there are things in life that I'm thinking that we didn't really need to know or didn't really need to have, and here's some of them. So number 3, this is kind of like I feel bad bringing this up, but it's an accurate thing to bring up. Let's say that you go to a store and you buy a lottery ticket, and then you win the lottery, and etc. Why does the store get a cut of the winnings, or get like their own $1 million? Like, I could walk into any store basically and buy a lotto ticket, and because I went to that store specifically, let's say I went to the store randomly and I had god awful service, but I bought a lotto ticket anyway. So you're telling me that my monetary donation and my windfall of winning the lottery is going to help the guy who was a jerk to me behind the counter get $1 million? Where's the fun in that? Like what? Like, we have to kind of, I say, go on the merit system. Like, you should make it, oh, you win the lottery, congratulations. Do you want us to also give us some money to the store that helped you win the lottery? No, I don't want to. They were awful. Their Slurpee machine was down, and they didn't have the right things for me. So don't give them anything. If you don't deserve it, don't get anything. That's how I look at that sort of thing. Number 2, this is kind of more of a pet peeve of mine, but it makes sense in a way. Books about and written by people who are still alive are not memoirs. Statues and parks and things that are named after people who are still alive are not memorials. Memoirs and memorials are for the dead. So when Kendall Jenner has a memoir coming out, immediately I'm thinking to myself, I saw some random other like social media star has one coming out. I'm thinking to myself, but she's still living. So A, I don't want to read your memoir because it's nothing interesting to me. And B, it's not a memoir, it's an autobiography. It's a personal note. It's not, you're not doing this. You're not doing the language correct. So memoirs and memorials for those that have passed on, autobiographies and whatever you want to call the things for those who are still alive. Simple? Great. I'm so happy you're here with me now. Number 1, I just found this out 5 minutes ago, and this is something that may catch traction. It may not. I don't know, but I'm going to put a stop to it right now.
Breaking news?
Maybe. So, as you know, Adrian Wojnarowski left ESPN to go to St. Bonaventure. So that means that we're on the end of the Woj bombs. And as you also know, last night, Karl Anthony Towns was traded to the Knicks, broken by Shams Charania. So what are we calling this now? I think you know, right?
Did you see this because I liked it on Twitter?
I might have. We're calling them Shamber Alerts. Look, Amber Alerts are a real thing that are, very tense, very dramatic, very dangerous things. And they shouldn't be replicated for the purpose of a funny Twitter thing. But that's the best that you got is Shamber Alerts? That's a sham that you're calling them Shamber Alerts, guys. Come on. Like, go back to the workshop, rethink that, understand what you did wrong, take your penance, go to confession, say your Hail Marys, and then get back and give me something better. I don't have a better one because that's not my job. That's your job. But, like, Shamber Alerts, guys? Come on. We can do better as a society. And if you don't, that's when you end up on a podium. and the immortal, eternal podium for Duncan and for Adam. They know who they are, and they know what they did.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Games Master, we'll see you next time when you're here, and we'll have a more collective unit, to say the very least. But plenty of fun football and chaos was had and discussed this week. It'll continue next week. Who will take the lead in the pick challenge? We have a real possibility that the mascot could be first place. It would be the latest in a season the mascot would be in first place. And I think we'd all have to take a deep look in the mirror ourselves if the mascot takes first at any point this season. Yeah, really bad. And all the discussions that we talked about, we'll see what continues. What players will vault themselves in MVP consideration? What teams are going to soon prove that they are contenders and legit? What teams will prove to be frauds? We haven't had a real fraud this season yet, so I'm very disappointed in that. I'm waiting for us to be able to put teams on fraud alert. And we talked about some coaches last week, talked about coaches this week. We will wait until like midway point of the season, ladies and gentlemen, but we're already making a long list and checking it twice for the head coach hot seat-o-meter at the midway point of the season. I'm excited. Hope you all are too. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time for another fun episode. Take care, all.